And then I decided, as a creator of the PMP, there's an opportunity here for me to have an impact on the profession by delivering quality-based training to people who have passed the PMP exam and want to maintain their credential. And they need those, thank goodness, PDUs. And if you think about PDUs in the right vein, it's the right thing, because there's always new stuff. I mean, we know that. There's always new stuff. So in order to stay current with what's going on in the profession, the PDUs sort of kind of force you into that situation. So that's how I got involved in this. And to date, I have presented my training programs to 50,000 students in 27 different countries. And so I love what I do. And the pandemic sort of put a cap on it for a little while, but this has picked it up because it's really something I enjoy. So I want to spend a little time. I got to set you up, though, for some of the things I want to talk about. First of all, when we talk about strategy, one of the things we have to be aware of when we're designing strategic objectives, when we're designing our project structures, we need to be aware of what's the execution methodology. What tools and techniques, what methods do my company executives have in mind for execution? Well, back when I started, back in the old days, we had a predictive model. And in GE specifically, it was very predictive. They would define a project. They would assign me as a project manager, and then they would assign a project team. And that team stayed connected through the life cycle of that project. Oh, it was pure. It was beautiful. Unfortunately, that's not the way we do it anymore. Very rarely are there dedicated project team players, and more likely than not, they are working on several different projects at the same time because of the matrix environment that we've created. Supposedly it's financially much more efficient from a work product output standpoint. I suspect I'd be willing to argue that point, but that's the predictive. And right now, 90% of the PMBOK is built around the predictive model. Now, that's not going to be true in the new one in January, but we'll talk about that in a minute. The second way that we have to be aware of is the IT environment, which has spawned off the concept of Agile. Agile Scrum, Agile Hybrid, Agile this, Agile that. And so what's happened is that the people who do IT projects got frustrated by the predictive model because they would say, we don't have well enough defined requirements to be able to execute this project under the predictive model. And so people began to think about that, extreme programmers especially, because they wanted to do things fast. And so in 2001, 20 of them all took off for Snowbird ski resort in Utah and sat around, and I'm sure drank ginger ale for a few days and created the manifesto, the Agile Manifesto. You guys think the PMBOK's big. Check out the Agile Manifesto. And so that became the driver. So now people would say, well, that Agile's an overnight. That was in 2001. It's been 19 years. So it's ingrained now. And the beauty of the Agile approach is it is elaborative. It's progressive. It doesn't even claim to know what the end product looks like. It claims to be able to start working towards it and evolve into it over time. The theory is, and I'm still not absolutely sold, so don't hold it against me, but the theory is it produces a better product faster. Okay, so take that to the bank. And these are the two main approaches, main methodologies. So, and if you're a predictive guy like me, and somebody says, "Can you do an Agile project?" and you say, "The what?" then they know that you probably aren't up to speed yet on Agile. So, but if you're going to stay in the business, and if you're going to be involved in IT projects, which is 60 to 70% of the operational budget in an organization goes towards IT projects. So if you're not going to be involved in that, then you may be left behind, because Agile is the way of the future. I'll spend more time talking about that. I got lots to say about it, and I'll try to elaborate, try to get you to understand clearly what the potential utilization is. So, but let's get back now to what we're here for, strategy. Okay. Now, if we look at the, oh my gosh, now it's there. If we look at strategy, here's what it looks like to most people. I mean, think about it. When I was a project manager at General Electric, for example, do you think when I got what now we call a chapter, what we call a project guide, when we get that information, a charter, do you think my first question was, well, what strategic linkage do we have here? Are you kidding me? No, what I said was, how am I going to get this darn thing done? And so now we're saying, no, wait, it's bigger than that. You see, we start out with this idea that project management is about triple constraint, scope, time, cost. Well, that's true. I mean, that's part of it. But the fact of the matter is, that doesn't matter if you disconnect from the strategy of the organization. But nobody is asking that question. When you get your project charter, you need to ask, what strategic objective does this project support? In other words, what I say is, we don't just do projects for the hell of it. We do projects because it adds value to what we're doing. And so we need to know that. Now, why do we need to know it? Well, let me tell you why. First of all, I need to explain where the strategy comes from. There are these people in your organization. Let's just call them senior people. Let's call them decision makers. They like that. That sounds a true ring to it, decision makers. And once a year, these decision makers go away to begin to plan the subsequent year for the organization. Okay, and they usually go to somewhere there's sand and surf and quiet so they can concentrate. But the fact of the matter is, they are there to develop a strategy based on organizational objectives, not your project's objectives, organizational objectives. So when the whole planning session starts, and this would be the C-level, CIO, CEO, COO, CFO, whatever the C's are, they're there. And now what they've got to decide is, what are the objectives for next year? Well, you look at this simplistically. I'll try to keep it simple. One of the objectives, organizational objective, could be increased revenue. Well, that seems reasonable. Another one could be reduced costs. So that's obviously one that we could take. And another one could be increased market share. And there can be lots of strategic objectives, meaning these objectives need to be accomplished if our organization is to remain viable and grow in the environment. So they create these strategic objectives. Now, here's the beauty. Out of one strategic objective, let's say it's increased market share, out of one strategic objective may come 4 or 5 projects. In other words, the strategic objectives spawn projects. That's where our projects come from. They come from strategic objectives that need to be accomplished to grow the organization. And so once I know what strategic objective it's linked to, now I know that I have a responsibility to maintain that linkage. Because, I mean, if that's the strategic objective, that's what the organizational level big shots say we're going to do, then I want to make sure my project stays consistent with that. So I've got to ask, what strategic objective does my project support? And I need to know the answer to that. And once I know the answer, then I know, based on executing the project, that I need to stay linked to that particular strategic objectives. Now, because we spawn multiple projects out of a strategic objective, we've come to form this thing called a portfolio, where we take like-minded projects that are all kind of working towards the same end, and we put them in a portfolio where we can focus attention on that particular strategic objective by managing carefully all of the related projects. So that's why PMI's come up with a portfolio management credential. Get it? I mean, what the heck? You might as well add another credential. And so you got to look at that, and you got to think about, how do we keep these things connected? So we need to understand, what is strategy and how does it impact me as a project manager? Okay, so that's one thing you got to be careful of. Now, the other thing you got to be careful of, and that we've beaten this into project management. I mean, it's really ruthless the way we do it sometimes. There's so much focus on scope, time, cost, the triple constraint, and now we've added quality. I don't want to seem out of date because we added quality, so now we have the 4: scope, time, cost, quality. That we've lost connection with the strategy. So now I just stick my head in the sand and go like heck, getting that project done, and I get it all done, and I'm so proud. And I look around, and hell, I disconnect from the strategy. The project's essentially useless. It's not adding any value. It doesn't support the strategic objective that we needed to get done. So I got to pull my head out. I'm sure you've heard that saying before. Pull your head out and focus your attention on, how does this project fit? Why is it so darn important? Where does it lock into the overall strategy of things? Well, part of the problem with that is caused by these guys right here. These are the C-level. Remember, we talked about the CIO, CFO, all the C-level, okay? Well, let's say each one of the C-levels have their own portfolio. Let's just imagine that for a minute. And so within that portfolio, I get a project, okay? And I identify the strategic objective. So I know what it is because it's in the portfolio. So that's the objective we support. So now I got 5 projects, mine included, 5 projects in that portfolio. Well, one of the first questions I ask is what's the priority of my project? I mean, there's 5 projects going on in the portfolio. What's the priority of my project? Well, that's the answer you're going to get right there on the screen. Why, it's number 1, of course, Lee. It's number 1. Well, Bob goes, now, wait a minute. What about mine? Yeah, yours number 1, too. And pretty soon they're all number 1. Well, that doesn't work. You can't have that. That was my GE lesson of all lessons. When I was getting ready to leave GE to go into the national laboratory, they asked me to review their business plan for the subsequent year, kind of as a favor, I guess, and comment on it, to anything I could see that might be strengthened. So I said, okay, what do you got? And he said, well, we got 25 mission critical projects. That in the old days, they were kind of linked into the government environment. Mission critical would be the top strategic objective, if I think about that view. So we got 25 mission critical projects. And I said, okay, you got 25 mission critical projects. You got 5 in this portfolio, 5. So if I look at this, let's look at this portfolio. Which one is number 1? Well, they can't all be number 1, you see. So I told the GE guys, which out of these 25 mission critical, which one, what's the priority of each of those particular projects? Because they'd actually done a good job of defining content and some budgets and some, they did a good job. And I said, but what's the priority? And I said, oh, priorities are on page 2. So I flipped the document over to page 2, and sure enough, there they were: priority. Project 1, priority 1. Project 2, priority 1. Project 3, priority, and so on down the line. 25 project priority 1s. Well, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to understand that in a matrix environment, all of the big shots want all the projects for their particular silo. And so now when we get to the execution phase, everything's priority 1. Somebody's got to make some decisions. Somebody's got to make some decisions. So it's not your job to set the priorities. It's management's job to set the priorities. Now, what does that do for you? Well, first of all, it tells you how much emphasis there is on your project, which translates, by the way, this is where I really made some names for myself in project management, because once I knew what the priority was, I knew what my leverage was in terms of being able to impact decisions. So if I say I need 3 subject matter experts, and the boss goes, well, I'm sorry, we only got 2, and then I can say, well, listen, I just got to tell you, if this is project priority number 1, we're going to slip about 3 months if I can only get 2. And so son of a gun, all of a sudden I get the 3 subject matter experts. So I want to use it as leverage. If I stay connected to the strategic objective, so I know how important that objective is, and then I stay connected to the portfolio, that I know how important my project is on a relative scale, I'm empowered to make much more definitive decisions. It's almost like you're smart. I mean, I'm not going to go that far, but it's almost like you picked up a brain on the way. Know what the priorities are. So first of all, know the strategy. What strategic objective does your project support? If you can't answer that question, get out of town, because you got to be able to do that. Okay. Second of all, what's the priority of your project on a relative scale? Now, here's why the whole idea of enterprise project management falls down a bit. That's because the senior level people don't want to make that call. They don't want to be held to accountability for the prioritization call that they made, so they sort of leave it loose. They leave it loose. And so we've got to pin them down. We've got to ask the right questions to make sure we're working on the right thing at the right time. It helps me do that. It helps me attract the right kind of skill sets to know they're working on the number 1 priority project. So these are all things that need to be done. And we spend more time on scope, time, cost, and not thinking about, well, that adds some value at the end of the day. And so we've got to look at it from that perspective. It's rather a holistic view of how all of the projects support the strategic objectives that we're looking at. Okay. So what we want to do, what our end goal is we want to be able to create, I'm going to call it a strategy office, that can help incorporate, link together all of the vertical hierarchies, the work breakdown structures down to the work package level of all the projects, and then merge that with the horizontal integration of all the resource pools and how they're assigned to the various projects. You see, what we're trying to get here is an automated way to tell us we've got an issue that we need to pay attention to before it happens instead of after it happens. Proactive, that's what project management is supposed to be. If you wait around until it happens and then say, oh gosh, I wish we'd have fixed that, it's too late. You got to be proactive. Well, that means I need automated support. So here's my IBM story. This is incredible. This is incredible. In 1993, IBM was predicting. Some of you are old enough to remember that. In 1993, you're predicting 8 billion. That's with a big B. $8 billion loss. IBM, $8 billion loss. Okay. So they jettisoned their CEO. Jack Akers was his name. They brought in a new CEO named Lou Gerstner, who came in from American Express, and then before that with Reynolds Tobacco. He came in to take over and turn IBM around. Well, nobody knew Lou Gerstner from Adam. Okay, we knew we were in big trouble with an $8 billion projection. So Lou came on board. It was about that same time I was retained to do project management training for IBM and Research Triangle. That's where one of their headquarters were based. And so I had just started my assignment there, and in comes Lou. Now, Lou did something that I think I wish more senior level people would do. He spent the next about 2 months. Okay, 2 months, that's a long time for a CEO, out in the field, talking to project managers, talking to CEOs of divisions, talking, looking at, analyzing. And so at the end of 2 months, he calls a big meeting, okay? No, I'm not in the meeting. They don't need from Adam. He calls a big meeting, okay? And in the meeting, he says this. He said, well, I've completed my study. He says, I've got some findings. He said, one of the findings is that IBM has lost its way. IBM has disengaged from its core competencies. IBM has tried to become all things to all people, and we find ourselves spread so thin, working on so many projects at the same time that we're unable to deliver on any of the projects. So, well, everybody kind of knew, we knew that. I mean, everybody knew that. And then he said, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to cancel 60% of the projects, and I'm going to retain our core value system, and we're going to work on the remaining 40% of the projects to get back to the IBM we used to be. And in fact, he told some senior level people, I heard this, I didn't see it. He told some senior level people, look, this is where this train's going, and you're welcome to ride along. But if you don't want to take this trip, get the heck out. Okay. 7 senior level executives left IBM that day. Okay. All right. So in addition, though, he had one other thing he wanted to point out to them. In order to be able to run those 40% of projects like we used to run them, he said, we're going to use project management. We're going to implement a very sophisticated project management approach and running these projects. Project management will become the thread that links everything together. Everything is tied together utilizing the project management concepts. And he said, we're going to call it, we're not going to call it PMO. That's not even close to important enough. We're going to call it the IBM Project Management Center of Excellence. And that spoke a lot of words. Those words had meaning. He named a woman in 1993. This was a little bit unusual, but Carol Wright was her name. She took it over, and I'll tell you what, I've never worked for anyone I had a higher level of respect for than Carol Wright. She implemented project management in the way I'm talking about it today. Vertical integration, horizontal integration, signals that go off in lead time, so much time to give advance notice, risk management put in place to project manage the rest of the way. So all of that was created and produced. Now they still have the Project Management Center of Excellence. Lou Gerstner's long gone, but it only took him 3 years. In the third year, he turned a profit. Okay, that's how fast it happened. And so they still have the Center of Excellence. They don't have Carol Wright. She's passed now. But the fact of the matter is, once you get the benefits of it, you don't want to let it go. You don't want to let it go. Okay, so it's going to take some software. When I was at GE back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, I had tools. Don't get me wrong. I had tools. I had pencil, paper, and an abacus, and that's what we did our project management with. And it was a little slow, but we got some things done. But here's what I want to do. I want to point out to you that to make any of this work, you got to do more than just listen to me. You got to get involved. You got to do the things that are the right things to do. So I want to talk a little bit about stakeholders. Okay, we PMI recognized finally, after years of complaining, that the stakeholder idea was critical to success in project management. Everybody knows now. Everybody's a stakeholder, and so we create a new chapter for the PMBOK. In the 5th edition, we added stakeholder management in recognition of how important it is. You got to remember, project management is really on the surface, it looks kind of fancy, but in reality, it's just an effective communication tool. It doesn't make decisions for you. It doesn't make decisions on anything that it gives you information to base your decisions on. So the stakeholders are important. Well, I'm going to give you 3 types of stakeholders that I recommend. Okay. The first one was be above this picture, and they are the stakeholders. Now, the control stakeholders are, this is going to get kind of crazy, but the control stakeholders are stakeholders who have control. In other words, they can authorize you to stop or change. They're powerful, and at least one of them will be signatory on the project charter, maybe more. But we need to know who those people are, because they're interested in your project and how it's supporting the strategic objectives that they're responsible for. So we've got to identify them. Now, remember, we don't communicate with all stakeholders in the same way, same depth of experience, same timeline, but we got to define what that stakeholder interaction looks like, okay? Then we go down to the next level. That's this level that you see in front of you. That's anybody and everybody who has any role to play on the project. We call these are influence or impact stakeholders. Anybody who their work can have an impact on or have an effect on the outcome of your project, by definition, are those level of stakeholders, okay? Every one of them will have their stakes, and we've got to communicate with them in an effective way. That's why PMI puts such an emphasis on the communications plan. If you read the PMBOK, I mean, there's probably 50 pages in there that says communication plan, communication plan. That's how important it is. So it all becomes part of the communications plan. Now, there's more stakeholders in the impact or stakeholder category, and those are the resource pool owners. The resource pool owners, they aren't working, they're not tied to your project, but their people are assigned to your project. Therefore, they become by de facto impact or influence stakeholders, because we need to communicate with them. We need to let them know we got the right level of resource support. We need 2 more subject matter, whatever the case may be. We've got to connect with them so that we can make that smooth transition. Identify resource constraints before they become a problem. Okay, so that's the one that we want. And then there's the last one that's called an information stakeholder. Now, this stakeholder is really not a stakeholder at all, because they're not working on your project. They don't have anything to do with your project, but they're interested in your project. So they're interested in your project, maybe because they think they'll have a project like it later. Maybe they've got one right now where they're encountering some problems, and information from your project may have a benefit to their project. So they need to be included, even though they're formally not a part of the project. Remember, our goal is not to just improve the project. Our goal is to improve the organization. So I'll give you an example of that one, a real quick one, because I don't want to run too thin on time here. I'm going to give you an $11 billion example. Okay, I've had the opportunity to deal in some very, very big dollar projects and be able to have a significant impact. This one's an $11 billion. I was hired by Behringer Mannheim from Castleton, Indiana, wholly owned by the Engelhorn family out of Mannheim, Germany, to produce a new product to do blood glucose monitoring for diabetics in home use. They were controlling the marketplace in 1987, but Johnson & Johnson came out with a new product, faster, better, cheaper, and market share just started to fall away. They decided they had to have a new product out that leapfrogged Johnson & Johnson to regain their position in the marketplace. The problem was it had to be done in 18 months. That project, that type of project, is a 3-year project. Had to be done in 18 months. So they hired me. They hired me, the miracle worker. That's what they call me. Are you the miracle worker? I said, well, it depends. So they said, well, here's what we want to do. And I said, yeah, I think we can make that happen. Okay, I think we can. So we divided up, and I got to pick my people. They had about 2,000 people in the organization. I needed about 200, so I need about 10% of the organization. So first off, I picked chemists, 25 chemists, because it's a blood interaction chemistry project. Okay, we need a new composition. So I picked 25 out of a pool of 100. So these 25 were going to be the ones that carried basically the weight of the organization on their shoulders. The 75 that didn't get picked were angry. They were actually very angry. Hey, I've been here 20 years. Why am I not picked? I got an honor. I was awarded the project, the chemist of the year. So I decided I better do something. They by definition are stakeholders. They've just confirmed they're interested stakeholders. So I better do something to address that. So what I did was I decided to have on 4 successive Friday afternoons, I wanted the functional chemist and my project chemist to get together for about 2 hours, no agenda, no objectives, no expected outcomes, and just talk about what they were working on, what was working, what wasn't working, what suggestions they might have. And this interaction went on for 4 weeks. They loved it. They absolutely loved it. Okay. At the end of 4 weeks, I had said, whatever we got 4 weeks, we got to go. We got to go with it. Okay. So we did. We went on with it. We delivered the project. in record time. It was actually, it's been written up by the PMI, which I'm so honored, as a miracle project. Okay. We delivered it to the marketplace. It recaptured market share almost immediately. It just began to suck the market share away from Johnson & Johnson. And 3 years later, the market control that we had as a result of this new product was recognized by Roche Labs, and Roche Labs acquired this little $1 billion organization for $11 billion. In 3 years, it went from 1 billion to 11 billion, wholly owned by the family in Mannheim, Germany. Well, I was the hero. And in fact, such a hero that every year I get a Christmas card from the Engelhorns. No money, no bonus, nothing. And when I accosted them about that, you know what they told me? They said, "You're a contractor. We don't have any obligation to you." And so they still remain the leading product of its kind in the marketplace. If you go into any drugstore now, you'll see it on the wall. But now it's got like 10 or 12 competitors. It still dominates the market. I happen to be diabetic. They didn't give it to me. I looked into that for potential lawsuit. But I happen to be diabetic, and I use that product. I still use it to this day. That product would not have been successful had we not listened to what the interested stakeholders had to say. The chemistry composition that went to market and resulted in an $11 billion acquisition was created by the non-project chemists. So every time I think about, I don't want to spend time talking to those people, they're not even on the project, I have to remind myself of my $11 billion story. So we want to be in a position where we can incorporate the stakeholders, because the information they provide will tip us off to when we've disconnected from the strategy or when we're having a negative impact on the strategy. It's an integrated data set, okay? So what we do is we look at project management, we say, well, you know what we need for project management are more tools. That's what we need, more tools. And so every year I look around and here they come, more tools, more tools, more tools. I'm buried in freaking tools. And so the thing that I've stopped doing because of all the darn tools is I stopped using common sense. And I'm so busy trying to figure out how to use all the tools, I forget to manage the damn project. So I want to look at it from that standpoint. So what I've tried to do over my career, even though I'm not managing projects anymore, I do one if I got a chance probably. But what I've done is I've pared it down to 3 things every project manager has to have to be effective. Okay. First one, of course, is the work breakdown structure, the WBS. And plenty of you know about BS, but I'm talking about breakdown structure of the work, okay? So we got to have that because I hang everything on that. The work breakdown structure is the foundation. Listen to what I'm saying. It's the foundation of all things project management. You probably can't show me a thing that has to do with project management. I can't link it back to the WBS. So I want to get that. I want to have that hierarchical decomposition down to where I assign skill set match, I assign budgets, I assign time, and so on. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, not negotiable. Number 2, a critical path schedule. Now, there are some of you listening right now going, what's that? What's a critical path schedule? That's my point. It's critical path because it tells me how much flexibility I have in making decisions that impact the way I execute the project. I want to have a dependent relation schedule, outputs to inputs, float paths, critical paths, everything needs to be defined so that now when one thing moves on a schedule, I can immediately assess the potential impact it may have on strategic objectives. So, okay, so WBS, critical path schedule, there's lots of them out there. You don't need one so darn complicated. You need to hire 2 consultants to tell you how to use it. And then finally, the third one is risk management. Risk management is kind of the key. I look to when I talk to people in interviews, I ask a lot of questions about risk management because this is the way I sort out the journeyman from the apprentice, if you will, because risk management is the secret to becoming a super successful project manager. Learning how to identify and quantify and deal with risk becomes one of the most critical elements. And when I'll ask an individual project, do you guys use the risk management? Oh yeah, oh gosh, yeah, we use it all the time. Like, can I see what you got? And he comes to me with a one sheet of paper, and I said, what is this? He said, that's our risk register. I said, "Oh, that's good. So that's one of the components of a mature risk management concept." So I looked at it, and sure enough, there's a list of 15, 20 risks assigned to individuals on the side. I said, "Okay, that's good. Now, what do you do with that?" He said, "Oh, well, we don't do anything. We just keep track of it. We just keep adding to it until we're out of paper, and then we get another sheet." Yeah, well, that ain't the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to be managing these things. So those are the three things. If you got them, I'm not going to guarantee you success because there's too many other variables. But the fact of the matter is, you will have increased your chances of success considerably if you can master those three tools that I'm talking about. And by the way, the people up at the C level, the strategic thinkers, they have no clue what we're talking about in project management half the time. All they know is they want it cheap, they want it fast. And so we have to kind of manage our projects for our own sake as opposed to the sake of others. Okay. So, but I want to point out a couple of little things before I open it up to some questions. Is first of all, we had this predictive model, and then we were doing waterfall. Some of you look old enough. You look old enough. You probably know how to do waterfall. It's been around a while. In fact, we know when we go into an organization and we see two different sets of people, and on one side are a bunch of old people that look kind of tired, and on the other side are young people running and just having a great. We know that the old people, those are waterfall people. The waterfall people. Oh, you heard old dog, new tricks. Well, when the agile started to really get popular, you talk to a waterfall people, well, they throw up. They don't want any part of agile. And so they want to stay doing waterfall. They've been doing them for years. They've been doing a pretty good job. And so most organizations maintain a little bit of waterfall capability. And that's how you can tell them. I do a lot of work still for the LDS Church in Salt Lake City. I'm not LDS. They think I am, so I just keep going. And they've got a little waterfall group, and then got a big agile group, and they seem to get along pretty well. So you're not going to do. I don't think you're going to eliminate agile, not in the near term for sure. But what we get stuck with, and I use that term lightly. Some agile people get mad at me. What we get stuck with is this variation. All it is, agile. Agile is not a big deal. I'm kind of tired of hearing how great agile is. Agile is nothing more than a variation of a British game called rugby. That's all it is. It's nothing more than that. Look at this graphic. You can see the ball in this case with the word requirements on it gets thrown into the middle of this thing we call a scrum. These are all people grabbing, biting, kicking, trying to get to the requirements. And eventually in the scrum, the ball squirts out and we run over and get it and run as fast as we can before we get tackled. And we have to have another scrum. That's the way we do projects in Agile. We start with what we know about requirements. We have a scrum. We find out what's going to be good. We attack that scrum. Then we turn that into sprints, and it's rugby, for God's sakes. How much can you screw that up? It's pretty easy to understand, and the analogy is so apropos. Because the ball representing the requirements admits that we don't have final requirements when we start. and they're going to evolve through the process of Agile Scrum until we get a good comfort feeling of what they are. Now, there's one other thing you need to be aware of, and this kind of hurts me a little bit. In the PMP, there's 1.2 million PMPs right now. Okay, that's quite a few, and they've been impacted by Agile. There's no question about that. And the reason they've been impacted is in the Agile process. The PMP's role is modified a little bit. Still got things to do, don't get me wrong, but the PMP role right now in a traditional project, we're the boss. Well, I mean, we're running the show, people. Well, in Agile, not so. The guy running the show is the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master sounds very, very elevated, very almost eloquent. The Scrum Master, and so PMPs are worried that, gosh, have I gone to all this trouble and learned a PMP and learn how to do the things that I need to learn, and now my role is changing so substantially. So I get 3 calls. I get 3 calls a week. I've already had 2 this week, and it's only Monday, asking me, Lee, should I go ahead and stay on the path of getting the PMP, or should I abandon that and get my Scrum Master? Here's my advice to them. Get them both. Get them both. They're not that different. And as the organizations evolve and find better, faster, cheaper, easier ways to do things, then every certification you have is going to add credibility to your efforts to get projects done. So now we see a lot of people, I see it on LinkedIn all the time. LinkedIn is just, people, as a PMP inventor, I try to make it a point on LinkedIn to congratulate everyone who earns a PMP. So I'm doing 10, 15, 20 of those little congratulatory notes on LinkedIn every day. Well, I'm seeing twice that many Scrum Masters. Oh, I got my Scrum. Well, now I'm not just Scrum Master. PMI saw this coming. You tell me they're not logistical in terms of their thinking process. They bought Disciplined Agile because they can see where this is going. There's a need there in the organizational environment. People in this profession are going to benefit from Disciplined Agile. So I see that on the screen. So whatever you're thinking about in the future, think through it, because a PMP is still going to be valuable. A Scrum Master is going to be valuable. All of those things are going to be important for you in an organization. Now, if you get sold on this, and I'm sure 1 hour presentation is not going to sell you, but if you get sold on this, that's good news, because I want contributors. I want individual contributors to be bought in. Okay, we believe in this stuff. Well, then comes the hard part. That is convincing the same people that ask you to link to the strategic objectives, the same people that you need what you need to be able to effectively conduct that linkage. The strategy stuff, it's a big enchilada. Well, no kidding. We've been saying that for years. That's why we haven't done it yet. So if we want to have strategic alignment, we want to keep connected to those critical objectives, I'm going to have to sell it to management. This is a hard sell. I don't have prices because I've never bought one, but it ain't cheap. And so then you got all the training. There's a lot of stuff involved here. So people say, well, does it pay back? And my gut says, yeah, gosh, yes, it pays back. We conduct more projects, more higher return on projects. We plan better for the future when we have information in a timely way. Okay, so that's what you're going to end up having to do. I couldn't do it. I'm not a salesman that way. Sophomore salesman, no way. I wouldn't do that. But if you believe in it, if it's adding value to what you do, it might be worth taking a shot at it. Just remember, you could be like the Kirby vacuum salesman. Nobody in the world wants a damn Kirby vacuum, but there sure are a lot of people buying them, because ultimately they proved that they're the best vacuum in the world. But at the time you bought it, you didn't want it. They convinced you. Well, we need to do that to senior level managers. They need to buy in on what it takes to effectively do strategy. Now, last slide, and then I'll open it up to some questions, is this is one guy, but there's actually two guys that I want to talk about here for just a minute. These are two good friends of mine in the profession that over-focused on scope, time, cost. They became proficient at delivering the project on time, on budget, to specifications. They just they became so good at it. Okay, well then we started talking about this strategic linkage thing, and I warned them. I said, you know, just getting the triple constraint done is not the whole story now. We've got to be sure we're supporting the strategic objectives. And they said, yeah, okay, sure. So they went on about their business. They met with the senior level management, and thank goodness they reinforced what I had to say. Well, the next project, they hammered it out, scope, time, cost, boom, done. Disconnected from the objectives, from the strategic objectives, and within a month's time, both guys were fired. They were let go. You should have heard the complaining. How can you fire me? I've delivered 9 projects in a row with every element of triple constraint met. And at the same time, disconnected from the strategy in most of those cases. So what I want to encourage you to do is think holistically about the project. Think holistically about the information that you're using to make project decisions. Okay, so that's the idea behind this whole Sunil enthusiasm. And I'll tell you, once you've had him hit you with some enthusiasm, there's no place to go. So I appreciate you listening in. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So, Lee, I've got a couple of questions here.
Okay.
The first one is from Kareem, and this is about the checking of the actual benefits after the delivery of the projects. So, do you believe that the checking of the actual benefits of after the delivery of a strategic project is part of the role of the PM? And one of the key challenges of being able to do that is that often that the benefits are financial, so it's quite difficult to judge the success of that.
Yeah, I think this happens to be a very hot topic. I've been bitching at PMI for quite a while about that we aren't validating that we got what we expected, that we aren't, that when we approved a project with a 10-to-1 ROI and we really only realized a 3-to-1, that needs to be looked at, but it's not. We just move on to the next project. The problem is, as you stated, it's a financial issue close to the vest. They want to be sharing that information with too many people. And so to this date, they've talked about improving in this area, by the way, but I've not heard what the process would look like. I don't think it's appropriate for the project manager. I think a business analyst would be much more appropriate for making that determination. But I'm with Kareem. It's not being done, and we're missing we're missing a lot of opportunities to refine the kinds of projects we do by not measuring, did we get what we approved?
And then I have a question. So in this agile sort of world, or in this generally very fast moving world, where the timelines for strategic planning and the strategic objectives can often change and be refined over the duration of a project, have you come across any kind of best practice for the project manager to kind of reflect as they deliver their project on how, if it's still aligning with the strategic objectives?
Yeah, the strategic objectives, if they're defined well enough, I can make that assessment based on the value of my project plan. With Agile, that changes. It can change weekly. And
Yeah.
so being able to make that determination becomes very difficult. It's not really my role to confirm that the strategy is consistent with the project, but it is my role to be sure to identify where it's potentially moving away from the strategy. But as far as being able to make that measurement, I've not seen, other than a well-defined plan where I can immediately pick up the innuendos associated with what's going on the project. I've not seen anything that say you and I could buy off the shelf to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any more? I'll hand back to you.
Yep. Excellent, Lee. Been awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was. I know we had our struggles, didn't we, contacting and getting online, but definitely believe it was worthwhile in the end, and we should have booked a longer period. I think we could have kept going there. Just a couple of things to wrap up on for those of you that hung on to the end. Hopefully, what do you see here? Just the slides. Just to remind you, the PDUs, I have posted it in the chat so that it's there. And the winner is Martin. Are you there, Martin? Apologies for my pronunciation. Are you there and you ready to share?
Hi, yes. I'm here, Martijn. Hi. Thanks.
Excellent.
Okay.
Well done.
Well, good. Nice to have won this prize. And I'd like to thank Lee for his talk about all his 45 years of experience on project management, and it's always good to see that it's coming down to stakeholder management at the end. So that's, I think, the key of all projects, whether it be
That was
waterfall or
easy.
agile.
That was easy. It only should have happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
The breakdown structure as well, a whole different perspective on BS, but it felt like a lifetime of learning in 1 hour. The good news is, again, I shared in the chat Lee's website, plus there's we will share this afterwards as well, the presentation and the link to Lee's website as well. So you can, I know you can find a presentation from Lee on YouTube if you want to either review it, because there was a lot in there, a lot of good stuff as well, but also to share it with your colleagues. So Lee, it's been awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Lots of
How
energy.
many we ended up with? How many people? I want to add it to my count.
I think it was up to 36 at one stage.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Add it to the list then. Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Super.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Lee.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.